I think we should start. Can you hear me? Is the sound getting through? Great. So, first of all, let me introduce myself. I'm John Cooper from the Francis Crick Institute and from the Wellcome Trust, and I am interim chair of the Stevenage Bioscience Catalyst. There's a slight change to our programme today because yesterday we had the extremely sad news that Alan Baxter, who has been our chair since the foundation of SBC in 2010, died. And we felt that we should start the conference by telling people that and just saying a few words of appreciation for Alan. As I said, Alan has been the chair of SBC since basically it was a piece of open ground. I worked with him very closely on the construction of the buildings, but Alan has driven the vision for SBC and has worked very closely with Martino and his team to deliver what we have today and to put us in the position for the really exciting future that we can have. As many of you know, Alan has had a very serious heart condition for many years, which he bore with a resilience and a matter-of-factness that I simply found entirely admirable. It's about the only word that I can use to describe it. Just before Christmas, he had a sudden and severe deterioration in his condition. And entirely typical of the man, he immediately told Martino that he needed to stand down as chair because he felt he would not be able to do the job properly. He also said to Martino that he didn't want to be paid for the month of December, which advice we decided to ignore, of course. All of us will have our memories of Alan, and some people here will have known him better and longer than I did. My own memories of Alan are of a person who was an outstanding human being, kind, warm, normal, friendly, smart in his own understated way. I last saw him not long before Christmas, actually, in the Wellcome Trust. For some reason, he'd been kicked out of a meeting because he was felt to be conflicted, so we stood around and we had a bit of a chat for 5 minutes or so. And during the course of that, and this is typical of Alan and of his wonderful wry sense of humour, he told me that he was known in his family for always having the last word. And therefore he had written a poem called The Last Word, which he was going to require his son to read at his funeral. And Alan actually was looking remarkably good at the time. He was looking and feeling better than he had for many times. But he told me this with a twinkle in his eye. And it sort of underlined to me the sort of individual that I've been working with for 4 years. A really great human being, a great sense of humour. And even now, I'm talking about his death, and actually there's a smile on my lips. And that is how I will remember. He left me always thinking warmly and nicely about him and about the things that we were working on together. He leaves behind him here a fantastic legacy. We are poised really for tremendous developments. And I know that he has been enormously helpful to Martino. So we will miss him deeply, and I'm sure many of you will. We had a discussion about how we might mark his memory today. And we decided that what Alan would prefer would be if rather than having a silence, we had a little round of applause. So if you would be willing to stand up and join me, we'll do it the continental way. Thank you very much. Now I can hear Alan saying, that's enough of that. Yeah. Get on with the business. He would have enjoyed the show today, and he would want us to enjoy the show, as it were. So I'm going to hand over to the proper chairman of the conference, Joe Pisani, who's going to introduce things.
Great, okay. Thank you, John, and welcome everyone on behalf of SBC to this, which is the third annual conference, Open Innovation Summit. I'm Joe Pisani. I'm a partner with PwC, and I lead our pharma and life sciences consulting business. And I commentate a lot on open innovation, so I'm very excited about the topic areas today. And I think, from the title here, how far have we come, is very apt. I guess open innovation is a very familiar term historically in terms of academic relationships with industry, etc. But I think, and certainly we believe, open innovation holds the key to crack a lot of unmet needs within the industry today. How to provide affordable healthcare, which is patient-centric, that actually cures and prevents disease. And I think we're on the cusp of seeing a lot of technology enablers and macroeconomic enablers to facilitate that. Look at things like antimicrobial resistance, where it's clear that our approach to antibiotics research has left us ill-equipped to meet what is a creeping risk in terms of antimicrobial resistance. Alzheimer's disease, and we'll be presenting some of the prizes later on, again is an example of where potentially lack of knowledge around brain science has led to a huge unmet need and potentially a huge health and social burden. And I think I'm really looking forward to saying where can we go in the future with this, particularly with things like big data and the promise of that and how we can leverage that, mobile healthcare, and indeed things like social media, which has given the voice to patient groups, and also then facilitated things like crowdfunding, which is a little bit more mature in the US, but you're actually getting potentially crowdfunding from individuals to steer and develop R&D programs. So I'm really looking forward to the events that we're having today. Just a couple of points on the agenda. Diana Finkhausen was originally meant to be our keynote speaker. Unfortunately, she can't make it. But I'm sure you agree we've got an excellent lineup of speakers today and some really interesting debates as we go through. Now, in traditional SBC tradition, we like to have an icebreaker. And I was just mentioning to Martino, it's a fantastic delegate list here. And in fact, if we can get all the people on this list interacting together, academia, healthcare providers, big pharma and small startups, we could have gone some way in terms of cracking open innovation today. So what we'd like to do as a quick icebreaker is to get you to introduce yourselves, not in plenary, but to each other. So we'd like to spend a couple of minutes. If you can turn to the people to your left and your right. If you don't know them, introduce yourselves. Backwards and forwards as well. If you know the people around you, then move around. Okay. Okay, well, that's great. There's a tremendous buzz in the room. Okay, so should we draw this to a close then and proceed with the agenda? Do I have a hooter? I don't want to shush people. Okay, everybody. So maybe we'll move on to the next phase of the agenda now. Okay, right. Okay. I really hated there to get people to quieten down, and I was tempted to say shush, but that's kind of primary school teacher type approaches. That was really good, just to hear some of the buzz in the room and some of the interactions there. So I'm hoping that we can continue in the spirit of that. Some really interactive and participative questions and good networking in some of the breaks that we've got. So I'll move on now and I'll introduce John Cooper, who's going to give the opening address today. And John, as you know, represents the Wellcome Trust on the board of the SBC and has recently taken up the role of interim chair. John joined the Francis Crick Institute in 2009, where he was Chief Operating Officer and Deputy CEO until September 2014. John now chairs the Construction Board, Project Board and Transition Delivery Steering Group and will lead on various other projects up until the opening of the Crick in late 2015, clearly an event that I think the whole of the UK life sciences is eagerly anticipating. Prior to Crick, John was Director of Resources at Wellcome Trust, responsible for a wide range of business services, including various construction and other large projects. And before joining the Wellcome Trust, John spent 30 years in the commercial electronics industry. So John, without much further ado, we'll just look forward to what you've got to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Jo.
Okay.
I do tell people without any pride that I don't even have O-level biology. So please don't test me on anything difficult. That's not my bag. My bag at the Crick Institute and before that at the Wellcome Trust has been to try to turn people's dreams and schemes into a reality. And hopefully we have succeeded at the Crick. I'm looking here at David Roblin, who has taken over from me as COO of the Crick and is also our Director of Scientific Translation. So very appropriate that he's here today. We are on the verge of delivering something which I think is going to be truly outstanding and will lead to wonderful partnerships with people in this room and in many other places. The exam question, open innovation, how far have we come? The title of today's conference, which I think is the third OI summit at Martino. It seems to me the answer to that is a heck of a long way. I do remember when this particular scheme was, just a budget and a bit of land. And from starting in 2010 to where we are at the end of 2014, I think we have to say that fantastic progress has been made. So as Barack Obama said in his State of the Union message, the State of the Union is good. And the SBC State of the Union is good. Progress, well, our incubator is pretty much full. That's really good progress. We have between 40 and 50 tenants, not a word I like, so I always put inverted commas around it. I'm not going to mention any of them individually because that will just get me into trouble. But some of them, I'm sure, are going to go on to do really great things. We have established partnerships with UCL, with Cambridge University. We have a presence here, not just from GSK, obviously, but also J&J, Eli Lilly, GE Healthcare. This all goes back to the vision that we had right at the beginning, that we wanted to bring academia, biotech, pharma together to make innovation more effective. And specifically, we wanted to create an open innovation ethos. And we managed to raise 38 million to do that from GSK, from the Wellcome Trust, from the Department of Business, Innovation and Skills, from Innovate UK, from the now defunct East of England Development Authority. I can't remember what their name was. And I think that they would be and should be proud of what Martino and his team have achieved. Two really important developments recently. It was announced in October 13, actually, but it's now taking shape, that MRC Technologies drug discovery activities were going to be relocated to the campus. A complicated project, but one in which we got a tremendous amount of help from GSK, for which I would like to thank them. But for SBC, a really important strategic development. We have to deliver on it. Yeah? We do have to make sure that MRCT and SBC become really vibrant partners, but I'm sure it will happen. Timescale on that is, I think, the fit out of the building for MRCT's purposes will start in the next couple of months, and we hope that they'll be up and running October time this year. I know from my other projects that things don't always go to time, but hopefully this one will. And then in December last year, while Alan was still our chair, it was announced that the Cell Therapy Catapults Manufacturing Centre was going to be based here, due to open in 2017. These are tremendous developments from what was literally just an idea and some money and some spare ground 4 years ago. I was going to say that these are important pieces in our jigsaw. I think that's actually the wrong way of looking at it, because jigsaw implies that there's something with boundaries and something that you know ultimately is going to fit together. We don't actually know that. We don't know what the boundaries are of what can be achieved here, but we know that a lot can be done. And we need to engage with you. We need to hear your views during the course of today and on other occasions about how we can take this open innovation concept forward in the most successful way. A word, but only a brief word, about our future plans. As I said, phase 1, our incubator, and the accelerator building, now to be occupied by MRCT, virtually full. So we are working on our plans for phase 2. We're also working on the non-trivial issue of how we raise the money to fund phase 2. But we are making good progress. There are two real motives for this, in addition to building on the success that we've already had. Many of our tenants are actually going to want more space, and we want to be able to provide that opportunity for them to grow on. And the other thing that is very much in our plans, which I will leave Martino to talk about later because he is much better at it than me, is that we see that there's a tremendous opportunity in what we have been calling convergent medical technology. And this is the sort of disruptive stuff that comes from multidisciplinary working, engaging people from many different scientific disciplines. A script which could have come out of the strategy for the Francis Crick Institute, actually. Well, may have come out of the Francis, or we may have pinched it from SBC, I'm not sure. But very much aimed at breakthroughs through disruptive technology, through engaging people from a very wide range of scientific and indeed other disciplines. So we're working on that. We would be very interested to hear your views. We don't have a very rigid view. Yeah? These things all have to have boundaries. We're very well aware that today's great idea is tomorrow's chip paper. But we do believe that there's tremendous scope here to build on what has been achieved by Alan and Martino, and to do so in a way which can make a lasting contribution to the UK's economic and economic performance and performance in the field of healthcare. I don't really want to say any more about that because our plans are at an early stage, but Martina, I'm sure, in the next session will be very happy to talk more about it. So that's a quick survey from me. You know, the state of SBC is good. We're very sad today because of Alan's passing, but Alan would have loved this. He would have loved the hubbub, he would have loved to hear you all talking, and he would have loved to hear your ideas. So please, during the course of the day, regard it as your duty to give us your ideas for how you would like this tremendous project to be taken forward. And we will be listening. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, John, and thanks. I mean, you heard the invitation there in terms of your ideas, etc., and how you can shape the next phase of SBC. We've got time for a couple of questions if people have got any pressing questions they'd like to ask John. I guess, as John described, a lot of them, maybe the more detail behind it will be covered by Martina in one of the panels. So I'm not seeing any hands being raised. Sorry? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you mentioned
do you want the mic?
Hi, Claire O'Neill from Original Ventures. So, John, you mentioned that you don't know what the boundaries are. And do you think that's something that the drug development industry in general is comfortable with? Because it has this weird mixture of taking huge risks with drug development, lots of years, lots of money, but is also, in other ways, quite a risk-averse sector. So what's the kind of attitude to this? We don't quite know where it's going.
Well, I think if I worked in the drug development industry and I was investing that amount of money, I think I would be fairly conservative as well. You do have to make a return on your money. I think SBC is well placed to have these slightly fuzzy edges, and we enjoy the backing of GSK and of the Wellcome Trust. We continue to get support from Innovate UK and from BIS, EDA no longer, of course. I think we should regard it as a privilege and a joy to be able to think a little bit in that way, that we don't actually know where we might end up, but it's going to be good fun and very rewarding getting there. I think that's a sort of philosophical statement I'm making, nothing terribly profound.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Perhaps we move on now to Malcolm's panel. Well, thank you very much, John. So now we're moving on to our first panel, which is open innovation and incubation. So I'll invite Malcolm Skingle and his panel to come up onto the stage. I'll introduce Malcolm and then he'll introduce his panel members as well. So Malcolm Skingle is Director of Academic Liaison at GlaxoSmithKline. Malcolm's been in the industry for more than 35 years. And part of his former role as a research leader in a neuropharmacology department involved co-supervising collaborations with academics in the UK, Europe and USA. He has more than 60 publications, and including articles on the interface between industry and academia. Malcolm manages academic liaison at GSK, and his role involves close liaison with several groups outside of the company, government departments, research and funding councils, small biotech, and other science-driven organisations. And Malcolm's contribution to the pharmaceutical industry was recognised by the award of a CBE in 2009. So let's welcome to the stage Malcolm and his panel.
Good morning, everyone. So we have a little under an hour, so I'm not going to go reading the CBs. You've got them in your books. I've got a absolutely wonderful panel here of shrinking violets. They might take a little bit of prompting into saying something. We have two people at either end of this team here who are both, their careers is all about incubating small companies in the biotech space, and they have mildly different views on how we go about driving business through. For some, it's more about the money. For others, it's more about the networks and the open innovation. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get them to spend no more than absolute tops 3 minutes each, starting with Glenn and then Martino and then the other three panellists whose names you can see on the board there. So they're going to do their opening remarks on sort of open innovation, incubation, the state of where we're at the moment, and then we're going to open it up to the audience, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, but if there aren't, then I've got quite a few of my own. So please, if you can introduce yourself, Glenn, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I stand up?
If you like.
So I'm Glenn Crocker of Biocity. I've been Chief Executive of Biocity for about the last 11 and a half years, in fact. And so I'd like to plunge straight in. And one of the questions that we were given was, should incubators exist to make cash or make a difference? So I'd just like to focus my introduction on that particular question and state my position with regard to it, because I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. In fact, I think they're codependent, and if you want a sustainable ecosystem that grows companies and builds successful businesses and translates innovation into the to the patient, then you have to have the money driving this. And my view is really born out of necessity, I suppose. Way back when I started out at Biocity, I arrived there in 2003 to 120,000 square feet of completely empty laboratories and offices. And at that time, it was by far and away the biggest incubator space in the UK. It still is the biggest, but at that time, it's a multiple of anything that was around. I had a £3 million grant to do some refurbishment work, and about £1 million or so to cover operating costs. And at that point, it could either go down one of two routes. One is to just go headlong to get more grants, pile in the grants and do whatever you could, just keep the money flowing in to cover the costs, because it costs a huge amount. I don't think people realise quite how much it costs to run these places, but it costs a huge amount just to keep them ticking over. So grants was obviously the first way to go. The other is to drive as quickly as possible to profitability and break even. And I chose the latter route, and that really informed everything else that we did. And the reason I did that is because grants are precarious. You never know what the latest flavour of the month is going to be. You don't know whether, particularly if you've been around dependent on grants in 2008, 2009, that whole stream was cut off. So that would have been an issue. And also, I fundamentally believe that if you are doing something that's of value, somebody should be prepared to pay for it. And if nobody's been prepared to pay for it, then you really have to question why you're doing it in the first place. So we focused on developing and creating new startup businesses and building the whole ecosystem that made it attractive for companies to be there, and more importantly, made them as successful as they possibly could. Because the better we were at creating and developing startups, the better we were at helping the companies to grow and develop, the more money we'd make, putting it completely bluntly, because the more space they take, the more services they would use, and the more profitable we'd be, and the more we'd have to invest back into those companies. So after about 3 years, Biocity became profitable. And that gave us the wherewithal to actually start to invest money into the companies and also to buy significant bits of kit. We bought NMRs, mass specs, those sort of things, which you can only do if you've got to that point by driving the profitability of the organisation. And so then we were able to expand. So we now have a site in Scotland. We have another one at Alderley Park. And we have a collaboration with Boots based on the Boots campus in Nottingham, focused particularly on healthcare and medtech. And that is all because of this drive towards profitability and making the money out of the business of incubation. So we're now in a position, it's taken a long time to get there, but we're now in a position to significantly increase the amount of money that we can put into the companies, raise substantial sums and cycle it back into incubation and innovation and do even more. And that's a long-term sustainable basis on which to grow the industry and to grow innovation. And that's the model. And I think maybe, I'm glad I walked over this way, because if I'd gone over to that platform, Martino may have tripped me up on the way. But I'm going to hand over to him now. Thank you.
So, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
So I'm Martino, I'm the CEO. of the Stevenage Bioscience Catalyst, and as Glenn's already prompted you, I couldn't disagree more. So, and I guess that's why we're on the panel today, and it's to try and stimulate you to engage in the discussion. And some of our incubator manager, science park manager colleagues are out in the audience, so we want to hear your views. But let me tell you a story. I came in to the University of Manchester Incubator Company to help manage and do the business development of what was Europe's first incubator about 14, 15 years ago. And we got lucky. We had two companies that on the back of 40, 50, 60 million pounds of investment, I won't name the names, those of you old enough will remember the companies anyway, but they basically created what became then known as the incubator's dilemma. Because what you're faced with then is that it is sometimes easier to get the 20, 30, 40 million of capital investment, and everybody forgets that you've got to run the damn things. So nobody remembers, apart from the Wellcome Trust this time round, glad I remembered that the operating costs are required. So what happens is you're driven to take on board the fact that actually those two companies that then had 40, 50, 60 million pounds of investment don't need the incubation anymore and should grow out. So nobody was talking about grow on space and grow out at that time, but that's what we were creating. The incubator's dilemma is that it's easier to cover your operating costs by keeping those companies, whether they're good or bad. Obviously, somebody thinks they're good because they've had 40, 50 million pound of investment. So your university vice-chancellor, whoever is championing you within the university says, that's good enough. Don't worry about going and get the next generation of incubates. We've got what we need. So that created a whole cluster process in Manchester and Northwest where there was a talk for the first time about creating Science Park and Grow on Space to move these incubate companies out. My argument is that in that early period of incubation, grow out and growing on and moving out didn't happen. So let me take you all the way around to today, and this is now poacher turned gamekeeper. I start blessed through my stakeholders to say, not only do you have somebody else paying for your capital spend for an incubator and accelerator, which you'll see this afternoon, but we're going to give you a longer lead time. And we don't want you to worry about the profit. We want you to break even and cover your costs eventually, but we're going to give you a longer lead time to do that. And you focus on the science and the quality and get this engagement that John Cooper was talking about through open innovation, through collaboration and partnership. We don't want you to do what Manchester and Babraham and Nottingham and others are doing. We want you to be different because you in the UK are the only location at that time with Big Pharma, the mothership, here and ready to engage and partner with incubates. And hopefully through the day you'll hear why that partnership and that collaboration is as important as getting the rent in. So that's my starting point today, and I just wanted to share with you why I disagree with Glenn, because most of us are confronted with driving towards paying the bills and worrying less about the quality.
Thank you. Kay, I wonder if you'd like to give an academic perspective.
Two companies, and I can tell you that the academics have moved an awful long way in the last 15 years, let alone the last 5, on innovation. I think the problem is we don't have the awareness within the academic community of the sort of things we're even doing here. If you ask the average academic about the SBC, they wouldn't have even heard of it. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, the universities have often, and Oxford included, I don't know whether anyone from Oxford is in the audience, but anyway, set up ISIS Innovation, which has been incredibly successful to set up lots of companies. But initially, the brief was to make money for the university. And I think that's the wrong brief. The brief is to create impact. And to go back to Martino's point, we need to have a longer term perspective. So the university needs to cover its cost and actually needs something back. But to need to have that in the first 2 or 3 years of the life of the company, I mean, it just can't survive that way. And that's what you have. And the second point I'd like to make is that one company, UCB, came to Oxford and said we wanted to collaborate on inflammation and neurology, which is what they're interested in. So John Bell organised a committee, of which I was part, and we wrote to all the departments in the Medical Sciences Division and asked for ideas, and we were overwhelmed. I mean, we were really surprised. There's so much innovation out there, and you guys don't tap enough of that, or we don't link in well enough to the academics. So in fact, we've set up collaborations with UCB, but also we've been able to now go to other companies and say, are you interested in these ideas? So academics are aware now these days of what they want to do, but they don't know how to do it. And maybe we should think about how we might get better engagement country-wise. It's very difficult to get from Oxford to Cambridge, so maybe Oxford's the bad example. But certainly we can do better than we're doing at the moment.
Thank you. For those standing at the back, there's a few seats down there if you want to come on down. So Andrew's got an interesting perspective because he's seen the big pharma side of it and then gone into running his own company here on the SBC. So.
Sure. So, Glenn, Martino, I'm on the receiving end of your comments. So, I represent Peptinovate. So, I'm CEO of Peptinovate for the last 3 years or so, and we're a small biotech drug development company that's growing out of the SBC here. And so, from my perspective, is that 3 years ago, we were that tiny blue baby in an incubator. And my perspective here is it's the role of the incubators to nurture and to grow those small businesses, not to take the money away from them or not to drive them so that they're always thinking about, I've got to pay tenancy fees. Our role as the tenants is to grow and to move on. But clearly we are that tiny, or we were that tiny blue baby. So it's not only the fact that you're in an incubator, what you need is those team of people around you to support you. So for example, it's not just the nurse who comes in and looks at you every day in the incubator. The team of the academics who are nurturing the ideas, who you can collaborate with and work with to do the basic science. Second only to that are your potential customers who you want to work with, to collaborate with, and a great example of that is the open innovation that we're seeing here with SBC and GSK. But all around that, within the incubator space, what we're really looking for is the collaboration between the tenants and also that interaction of the tenants helping each other write grants, get funding, but also the interactions with the potential investors. So that whole ecosystem that surrounds the incubator, and I use the analogy of the blue baby as a simple one, but that's how companies start. Until they're strong enough to stand on their own 2 feet, they need that support in their incubation. So I take both sides of the argument, but actually coming at it from the small drug discovery outfit that we were 3 years ago, coming to SBC has now allowed us to stand on our own 2 feet, to start to get out of that incubator space and really be able to drive our business forwards.
Thanks. And then from a large pharma perspective, Mike Snowden.
I say a large person there. I think it's for the three of us to be mutually disagreeable to both of the end comments. From AstraZeneca's perspective, I think I have to side with Martino here, and that to me, it's all about the science. It's all about getting people together at the edges of their disciplines, mixing those people together to get that true innovation. My perspective is that innovation, if it's put together correctly, and I think you can plan for innovation, happens very rapidly, and certainly a lot faster than money. Money tends to dribble through the system incredibly slowly. And the risk I think money takes these days is not enough. The best innovation programs that I've been part of that I could describe as open, and usually you describe it after the fact, when you look at what's been achieved and you decide that actually that really did look altruistic, that really did, it was on at the moment and to the benefit of everybody. I think when you look at those sort of open innovation programs, they've happened incredibly rapidly, and they're irrespective of geography. From our perspective, the science drives us in AstraZeneca. We don't go to a building and survey what's in that one building. We tend to use our staff and mechanisms to look very globally. And I think, whereas I am a very great supporter of an incubator in terms of the basic building blocks of innovation, what we are missing, I think, is the risk-taking, the rapid iteration of great ideas, but we're missing the interconnectivity with the incubators that exist. You get very good intra discussions, I think, in an incubator, but that is incredibly limiting. What we're missing, and what people who run incubators need to drive, is communication across this incubator network. Otherwise, they'll be self-limiting.
Okay, thank you. I mean, to that point, I mean, I get the feeling that the incubators do play nicely. Would you say that's true, Glenn, Martino?
Yeah, I mean, I've got multiple comebacks on this. Can I go through the whole list?
Calm down.
It's going to the last point. Interconnectivity between the incubators, I think, and Martino, I'm sure would agree with me on this point, in that there is a great network out there that particularly some of the leading larger incubators across the UK do actually work together very closely. And within BioCity's network of 4, we have companies. We've got a trip from a group at Alderley Park tomorrow, coming down to Nottingham to meet with about 5 different companies there. And those sort of things happen all the time. And probably less so between different incubators outside of different groups, but certainly it does happen. And I think the incubators themselves work together really well. I'd also like to challenge the fact that you can either have open innovation and collaboration, or you can have an environment where you're making money. And the two are not mutually exclusive at all. In fact, somebody has to pay for that. So when you get your company starting up and taking the space, somebody has to pay the electricity bills, and somebody has to pay for all of that stuff. And what you have to do is make sure you've got it down as low a cost as you possibly can, and partly you can do that from scale. So a BioCity in Nottingham, you can start out as a company in a lab for £350 a month. That should not be prohibitive to a company starting out. And to be honest, if it is prohibitive, then that company probably shouldn't be starting out in the first place. So somebody has to pay for this stuff, and I think once you get it going, once you get it self-financing, then you can do a hell of a lot more. And the risk-taking that you can take within the investment arena, within life sciences, can be done, I think, really effectively from within the incubators. So as we start to raise the amount of money that we have available to invest, we've got the fund from AstraZeneca now, which will be invested in Alderley Park, which BioCity is managing. We've got our own money that we manage. We can take an awful lot more risk, because we see these companies, we see these opportunities day in, day out, and we make much more informed decisions. And sometimes you might work with them for a year or 2 years before actually making that investment. But when you do it, you can really commit to it and make a sound investment decision, as opposed to doing it on the back of a business plan and a few meetings. As a result of that, I think you can afford to take more risk, and we'll get more interesting, risky opportunities coming through as a result of that, and more success stories. I'll stop there because I've still got loads of other things, and I probably want to spread it out.
I agree with Glenn. I don't think it's a great network. I think it's a fantastic network, but I don't think it's working optimally. And it can't be, because government, and case point, people don't know. We're not good at communicating what's actually happening. And then the worst crime of all, there's not enough B2B going on across the incubation network. What's also happening is we got caught in a dilemma of, are we associated with the Trade Organisation for Business Incubation, or are we associated with the Science Park movement? Well, actually, we have an independence because we are different, we feel different from both. But if you look at the clusters across the UK, the clusters haven't changed in terms of strength in life science, but there's been a slight shift now with these what are called pharma parks. If you look at Newhouse up in Scotland, you look at Alderley in the northwest, the incubation centre of activity feels like it's moved a little bit, and obviously Stevenage and the Babraham here in this southeast cluster alongside Imperial and Elbic and others. So it's how do you get that message up to say, what I get back from government is, great, congratulations, all your incubators are full. But what are you full of? And how are you impacting the economy, and where are the jobs, and where's the wealth, and where's the sales? Now, there's an argument that says that's the wrong metrics for an incubator because we're in the early stage. But we have got to play better, not nicely, but better in showing how we then create these opportunities for high growth that then do have an impact. And I don't think we as incubation managers have quite tuned into that, though some of my colleagues in the audience might disagree with that. We're very good at showing how much investment, how many jobs, but you know, the quality of the science being translated in other ways through collaboration and partnership, we all need to get with the programme.
So just to comment on that, it's very incubator-centric. It sounds to me as though both sides are so saying, as an incubator, we do this for everybody. As an incubator, we do that for everybody. And you're sat and talking in your little incubator forum, but I don't see the sharing of the companies inside the incubators across the different locations. That to me is the biggest flaw that we have. There's little tiny clusters, great big clusters everywhere with lots of innovation inside of them, but they're sat in silos around the country or across Europe. But what we don't see is that cross-connectivity with those businesses. And I think being blunt, it's great having the incubators talking to each other, but you're talking at this level. There's no cross-connection between the companies across the way. And I think it's fantastic that you are liaising with each other, but there needs to be more.
Yeah, I would disagree. I think there are tons of examples in this audience, actually, of companies that are down here from various Biocity incubators that have been down here on multiple occasions. Not everybody's going to be able to, or in a position to interact with everybody else on the site. And actually, if you look at the entire population, probably the number of relevant connections is very small. And so you're not going to see people lining up at the door coming to do tours, but it does happen. Could we do more of it? Absolutely. Yeah, there would never be an end point to that. You could always do more and more, but I do think it does happen.
Could we communicate it better, Glenn?
Could we communicate it better? We could, but then who cares whether we communicate it better? As long as the companies...
The Treasury would care. I mean, are you delivering
I don't
to
care
UK
what the
PLC?
Treasury thinks.
I think the scientists would care as well. I mean, the connectivity of the ecosystem demands that we need to have that information out. And
no, I'm not suggesting that we don't connect better and we communicate with the companies better. But as far as the outside world is concerned, you get on with the job and do it.
Yeah, so I'd just take issue on just one of that point, which was around that, whether the companies are relevant to talk to each other. The best interactions I've ever had have been at coffee machines or in the auditorium right there, when you've no idea who you're just about to bump into and you meet them and there's a connection, which goes back to John's point that this is not a jigsaw with a defined edge. Let's just bump into people and see what happens. Yeah. And if we sort of say, well, we'll take a group of DMPK guys or pharmacology guys down here, we'll talk to their guys, then that's sort of forcing something to happen rather than just saying, okay, let's let it flow, see what happens, and sparks will fly. And I think that's really the point.
Yeah, and those coffee machine conversations are exactly why these sort of environment, or the environment just across the road, is ideal, because that's where you are compressing things. And you can encourage those things to happen. Again, you get people along to events like this, and hopefully those conversations will happen in the breaks as well.
To the audience, it's not just a chat up on the stage here. Derek Jones, can you say who you are and where you're from so that people know?
Good morning, my name is Derek Jones. I'm the Chief Executive of the Babraham Research Campus, which does a similar job to both Martino and Glenn. The point I'd like to say is we are facilitators. We can't make the companies interact with other companies, other campuses. All we can do is facilitate the interaction. At the end of the day, it's down to them. I think one of the challenges we have is geography. And it's quite local how these things work. Cambridge seems to stop about 5 miles from Parker's Piece, from what I can gather. And it's quite difficult to get people to realise you have to go outside these areas to interact with other people. But that comes a lot from the companies and their want or need to actually go to other places and find what's going on. So I don't think incubator managers should get the blame that companies not interacting with each other at different campuses. I think the companies now need to explain what they want to do, and we'll make it happen for them.
Thanks. Any more from the floor? One here. Here, sorry.
Mike Fisher from Apcodia. Does this work? Yeah. So UKTI and other groups like that will take missions of companies from the UK and take them around loads of centres to find lots of companies to go and collaborate with. There's a mission from London to New York and Boston in a couple of weeks. And a couple of times, and they are really good, not necessarily to go and meet people in the US or wherever, but to meet the other people from the UK that are looking for business. And one of the ideas that came out ages ago and has been mentioned a few times and has never happened is a UK mission of UK companies. What you could do is get companies from various incubators and take them around the UK to go and see the big farmers and go and see all the other groups to try and find partnerships. And who would do that, I have no idea, but it's just an idea I'd like to throw out that maybe people would like to do and would really help with collaborations and open innovation, etc. So just a comment.
So you don't engage with the knowledge transfer networks to
I used to work for one, but yeah, that's never really happened.
No.
They do the odd event, but to go out to centres,
Sure.
go and look for partnerships.
Okay.
Hello. Is this on?
Yep.
I'm Robin Mayton. I'm CSO of Magda UK. I'm one of the small startups at the incubator here. A couple of points in different ways. Partly, I must say that the sort of supportive environments that Martino set up here and the people surrounding the SBC and that sort of system where we could come in as a new startup, we had support in terms of access to equipment, which would have needed a huge capital investment, which allowed us to then actually be able to work here and start doing science without that, without having to have that capital ourselves, meant that we could do science here. That's the reason why we came here. And the supportive environment has allowed science for us to happen in a way that if we'd had to find the capital to buy all the equipment and so on that we needed for everything, we'd have struggled. So support is incredibly essential, I think, for small startups. The second thing is about getting people to talk and open innovation. And actually, that's the really difficult thing. As highlighted by several people, it's easy for people to talk within an incubator. I know Andrew quite well from several coffee machine conversations, and it's that sort of thing which incubators are essential for, I think, in terms of developing science and allowing small startups to develop within each other. You find you can help each other out. You have conversations where you've got skill sets which overlap, you've got knowledge which overlaps, you can help people out. But that's a coffee machine conversation. It's very difficult to do that between campuses, as it were, because you don't have those casual conversations. If you're going somewhere with a purpose. You have to achieve something, you've got expectations. You don't have the sort of links where you go, oh yes, I know something about that, have you thought about this? The problem with companies is you're not used to giving away information. That's the open innovation challenge. You're not used to saying, oh yeah, I've got this great idea, you could use this, I'll give it to you, I'll tell you this information for nothing. That's not the way companies are set up to work. And trying to get people to have those casual conversations between campuses is going to be incredibly difficult. You have to persuade people in some way to effectively publish their sort of knowledge base. Oh, we've got expertise in all these sorts of areas, and you could come and speak to us, and we might give you a hand, but what do you want back in return? And that's the challenge of open innovation, I think. And that sort of cross-nurturing between campuses is very difficult to generate because you don't have the casual conversations. Within an incubator setup, it's easy because you run into people, you have a coffee machine conversation, and then you discover things. I'm not sure how you can make it happen without overcoming some of these open innovation hurdles about releasing information in a cross-country network.
But you must have seen a cultural change over the last few years, I would have thought. I mean, certainly large corporates certainly put more out to get more back. I mean, that's the ethos of the day with increasing externalisation. Go on.
So that's small business to small business. What would be quite interesting to see is perhaps Mike's view on how AstraZeneca is approaching this conversation with small businesses as well in the incubators.
So I think, I guess the latest example for us is the MRC collaboration with AZ. So whereby we are, actually I can't tell you much about the collaboration because we don't actually know what it's going to be. And because we are both coming together as a meeting of scientists and we are willing to take a big risk on what's going to come out of it. And I think if you take those risks scientifically and financially, then you get closer to the open innovation philosophy that I believe in, which is you don't know what's going to come out of it. You're both risking significant amounts of intellectual property or finances because you think that something's going to get there in the end. You don't have a very heavyweight business development, biblical-sized collaboration agreement. You're just working iteratively in that sort of very early open innovation framework. And we decided that when we wanted to have a collaboration with the MRC, that it'd be better for them to actually work with us in the labs. We can support them with knowledge and vice versa. There is no finances that have been agreed. We just have an end point in mind, which is we want to make sure that the corporate collection, the molecules, see the biology of the MRC. And whatever happens after that is for agreement later when we've seen that innovation. So I think this sort of more nurturing approach rather than we'll stick them in a building, a little bit on the outskirts of the company is the way that we'd like to go. And we have some other examples of that sort of very lightweight, high risk-taking sort of scientific agreement. And I think that's the way we're going.
Okay. Martino? Oh, sorry, Kay.
Just to add to that, that's what's happening within the universities. We're not exclusively collaborating with one company anymore, and people are putting staff within the universities and vice versa to do, and taking risks in that sense on the intellectual property. Yeah. But I think we're getting it more or less right. But we haven't had an accident yet. I guess that's the proof.
So here's a little crib note for the answer to the exam question, and then to throw it out to you guys to really give us the answer. Where have we got to date with open innovation? You know what? My view is that Big Pharma really does want to do it. They're not sure how. They're still on the externalising R&D route. Academics will tell you they've been doing it forever. I'm not sure what they're doing is really, truly open innovation. But the hard bit and the challenge for us in the next 2 to 3 years is around the SMEs and biotech. And it's tough and it's very hard. And they get this bumper car model of it's a contact sport, you have to engage, but there's like a recoil that says, as Robin says, but I can't give you all the answers. That's my business. So what is the answer?
So we had a question here. Someone's been patient for ages. Who's on?
Gwen Palin, Nottingham-Trent. What I would like to hear from the panel is where you see universities in this open innovation process, because there's somebody who is responsible for the companies. Once they are formed, they are focused on their activity. And Glenn's point about £300 a month isn't the breaking point for the company there. It is how they then interact with the potential funders who's going to take their innovation to the commercial stage. So where I firmly believe universities are the open avenue. When the company, it is very difficult for the companies to be too open.
I think it's shades of grey. I think there are examples of universities in the audience today that you should talk to from UCL and Cambridge who know all about open innovation, how to engage, who found it tough, can give you the warts and all difficulties and challenges. You've got a group from the University of Manchester here who not only do open innovation around traditional spin-out and access to IP, but there's a guy here who's doing social enterprise and open innovation. That is amazing, and that's a real eye-opener. So shades of grey. There are universities around who, whatever they say to you directly, don't give a stuff about open innovation. But it's the same in every community.
Question here.
Richard Weaver from Xenergesis. I'm the Managing Director based at BioCity. I'd just like to support Glenn, actually, and I should state that although Glenn's on our board...
do you get cheaper rent for that?
Glenn knows me well enough that I would disagree with him. But I'd just like to support Glenn and his team because what Glenn did for us, I was at AstraZeneca Charnwood, when the site was closed, and the same week that the site was closed, Glenn put a news press out, and it was free lab rent for a year for any startup. So actually, it's not a case of he was just dumping us in there and off you go and shutting the door. He was extremely supportive, and so were the staff as well. But I do agree about this money thing. We're a CRO, and it's essential that we generate money, as quickly as possible. And there's nothing like the focus of having to feed 2 kids and pay a mortgage from being in the big comforts of big pharma to actually focusing one's mind on the key port of call. Grant funding in its own right has a very important place, but it cannot grow businesses directly. So it's been very important for us in the first place. And one other minor point, I think it's important to consider what type of company they are in the incubators. We're a CRO, so we're a money-generating system, where somebody like Andrew, for example, he needs to raise funding, and that's a money-burning company until, hopefully, Andrew gets a payout. So I think there's some subtleties there that one should consider.
Okay, so. Can you pass the mic over to your right, please? Thanks.
Yeah, Gil Buchner from Amgen. Actually started 3 months ago. I'm actually passionate to bring innovation over to Amgen or generally to America. I think what could be really effective would be as innovation center, present yourself in Amgen and go make an open day there, and then present all the companies. Because I think it's always difficult for us to get everybody into Amgen or every big company to speak with every little company. But if you come over there, we can get everybody, venture capitalists in all the therapeutic areas. I think maybe this could be done better, that you present yourself as a unit, as different companies, and you go and do an open days there.
Thanks.
Okay.
Ian Thomas at the back. Left.
Ian Thomas, I'm from Cambridge Enterprise, the University of Cambridge Technology Transfer Company. And we have helped the university run some labs over on the SBC site, and it's been a great experience. But I think, and I agree with that there are various different models with which you can run incubators, and they all, broadly speaking, do a very good job. But a point that really has come out from Martino and Mike and Andrew really highlights that one of the major issues is fundamentally a business development issue at the innovation phase. And everybody's talking about how they need to protect their own particular interest, how you actually take risk, how you interact. But every single one of those statements has always come from a perspective of, I want to interact with the world, I want to interact with a world where there's lots of little different pieces, but what's in it for me? And we clearly do that. We take that approach for our own projects and our own assets and our own companies. But I think one thing that will move open innovation forward a very long way, which I like to think that we've done or participated in, is through those cooler conversations, through our networks, beyond our own little micro-environments, that we think about the other parties with whom we interact. And I think, ironically, one of the biggest effects we've had in terms of impact that maybe doesn't ever get connected back to me or my team or the University of Cambridge is how we've helped other parties interact with each other. And it's because we've spotted that such and such a company, the SBC, and obviously these are confidential interactions for them, but actually I think we've had as much impact in the open innovation area by helping third parties connect. And I would encourage people to start thinking a little beyond their own immediate 4 walls, because that will certainly help to build the spiderweb network. And good things come back to those who play well. I think it's a very important thing to do.
Cheers. So hi, my name is Tim. I'm from a Cambridge-based startup. We do drug repositioning for rare diseases. And we've heard a lot about open innovation. We've talked to pharma companies, etc. But I think the model with startups doesn't work at the moment. So we've stopped and we've turned it upside down. So now we work with patient groups and charities, and we're about to sign a $200,000 contract with a foundation in the US. So I think the model works, but I'm really curious to hear from the pharma companies around here how you're gonna change your model to work with startups of our stage. Because if you want to support innovation and support startups, you need to work with startups. And so far for us, we've had many discussions which were fruitful, but it's not going quick enough. So thank you for your comments.
Okay. Do you want to answer that, Mike?
Yeah, I think speed is of the essence. I have to say, I mean, I think for a large pharma, you have to be very clear what you want to support and what you don't. And we do need to get that business development process more rapid, more fluid, and more risk-taking, I think. I can't talk about your particular company, but of course, large pharma do support a phenomenal number of startups. In fact, they're not classified as sort of startups. They're individuals at universities or whatever that happens to have a great idea that they think they might be able to leverage for enough cash to, £350 doesn't get you one experiment, right? It might get you a lab, but it doesn't get you anywhere. You have to have a huge amount of support and a huge amount of investment in know-how and time and just nurturing, I think, to make it worthwhile. So I think pharma can do a lot more, I think. But we do like to get early and to help build. But it has to be in that lightweight BD, very rapid turnover. Get a quick yes or no so that the individual knows whether there's something that's going to fly or not. We don't do that. Actually, I think pharma has a pretty bad name in terms of listening to small biotech, small ideas that are really going to take off, but spending 5 months, 6 months, 9 months cogitating, and that doesn't do anybody any good. So I think, having been married to a business developer, which Alan Baxter actually helped, and he was very drunk at my wedding. But I think there is a real place for the financiers, the BD, and the scientists getting together and making that a lot more fluid.
Okay, let's have a question there and then come down here because this chat's been waiting forever. So, go on.
Tony Walker, University of Manchester IP. Having been both an incubator practitioner and also worked in university space, I think the point that was made before was that science is working at the edges, and I think what we have to do as partnerships is work at the edges as well, and I think we're working at the edges of reasons and almost like collective consciousness where incubator managers have to be sort of multiple personalities sometimes because they have to listen to the SME, listen to their key parent with different drivers, whether it's place-based regeneration or it's capital accumulation or it's job creation. And the incubator manager often has to dilute that and bring it all out into some form. And I think where we probably do is we reach a certain level of attenuation when the SME has to fly, like Martino said, and grow on. And I think actually when they start to find their own answers, that is really when they truly are ready to go and independent. So it's a very fine balance between guidance, advisory, almost like in a sort of, a way of growing people. So I think if we work at the edges of agreement with pharma, agreement with incubators, agreement with universities, that is where the open innovation is really going to grow, rather than saying whose model's right, which place-based regeneration is right, whether it's social, mission or whatever. And it's great to hear that that is a different model where patient advocate groups, big pharma are all working together in a social way with different metrics. I think that's a big area that needs to be developed now.
Yeah. Thank you. Can we have just here and then we'll come to you, I promise.
This is Jordi Quintana. I come from Business Development at Barcelona Science Park. So thanks for the invitation to come here. I've learned a lot from the first roundtable. Let me tell you one thing. You have the same problem as we have in Catalonia, in Barcelona. So it's a common problem. And just a comment about the coffee machine. We have done 2 experiences, one every year, a day called Networking and Innovation Day. Why don't you come here and share with other people as if you were in a coffee machine? It has worked. There's people from the industry there, people from SMEs, people from research centers, people from the university, people from technology transfer. And we set this up not just as a coffee machine, just talk, but we rather use coffee machine plus lunch and one-to-one partnerships. So you sign up as if you were in Bio Europe or whatever, okay? So the problem is there. The coffee machine solution could be this kind of events for one day like this one, but where you just, make people flow on their ideas, okay?
While the microphone's working its way around to this side of the room, because that lady's been very patient here, halfway around here, thanks. I mean, we got that message about the meeting place. In fact, today, what we used to call the Rotunda is being rebranded, renamed and reopened as a nice meeting area that's going to be completely open. Please.
Well, I would just like to emphasise, Mira Doig from ABS Laboratories at Biopark at Welwyn Garden City. I think it would be nice to actually see a lot more integration between the different innovation sites, because the companies change a lot. Whether you have open days, meet and greet days, maybe on therapeutic areas that you actually open up and you invite other people to come in and have a meet and greet in your specialised area. It is there where you do get the networking of people saying, yes, I've experienced that, or I know somebody who can do that. And that is really what we're missing in the UK. As somebody else said earlier, with the UKTI, there's lots of missions to go to Canada and the Netherlands, but it would be nice if we do have the same sort of thing with the different incubators in the UK and Scotland.
Thank you. Bill Dawson.
Bill Dawson, here at SBC on the expert panel. Really we need to think about the behaviours that we're trying to encourage here. Small companies, in my experience, really don't have much time to travel around the country or the world doing things with other people. Most of the time, they're trying to fix the problems in their own labs for the next stage of funding. And I think there is a middle ground that we can try to use the expert panels that certainly exist here at SBC, and I'm sure other incubators have them in some way, because those are, if you like, disinterested parties with experience who can see where there might be marriages between small companies and big companies, and we don't use that process sufficiently. It's third-party validation, if you like, of potential interactions, and we could do more with that, and we don't. We have big pharma saying, we'll come in and ask, or you can come to us. That's not going to work for small companies. It never has. We have universities who say, we've got lots of things. They have to be titrated to potential interest and scope, and somebody needs to do that. So they, of course, being a consultant, then of course I'd say we need consultants to do that. But you do need experts who've worked in the field to be open enough to share ideas between companies, large and small, and universities. And there's no process in the UK that facilitates that. I think what Martino has tried to do here with his expert panel is to start that, and Discover Assist as part of that does it, but there's lots of opportunity to do more.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to take a couple more over here, over this side, because you're due a cup of coffee in less than 5 minutes. So in a moment, I'm going to ask Glenn and Martino just to give me a minute each summing up.
With Iridian, based at the SBC. We've had a lot of focus on one-to-one interactions or interactions between companies which appear to be face-to-face. I was wondering whether the panel had a view on the role of things like social media, which would enable individuals or companies to perhaps interact better, and techniques like using crowdsourcing for gaining information, and whether that's a way forward.
Quick response to that from anybody?
Yeah, I think it's an important part of what's coming next. You know that we're trying to develop a portal that is more than a website that allows this engagement and chat. We're trying to use social media, but it's getting the startups to look up above and beyond what Bill described as survival from day to day. But you know, to me, all of this just smacks. The elephant in the room to me is fail early. I hear a lot of metrics where I think, ooh, maybe some of our companies shouldn't be where they're at.
David Andrews, Royal Society of Chemistry. We've heard a lot about finance, universities, incubators, pharma. Learned societies like the Royal Society of Chemistry, should they have a role in open innovation, or is that something we should stay away from? And if we do have a role, what sort of contribution can we make to that environment?
One word. David Fox, Tim Gallagher, compound collection, academic. Move on.
I think he means it's in process. Yeah. Last one here.
Sorry, one more question, if I may. Just with regards to interactions, you know, I think it's not up to these guys to make these introductions. It's up to the companies within these places. You know, I may say something controversial now, but you know, innovation is not coming from big pharma. Innovation is coming from the startups, the CROs. You know, this is the new innovation as far as I'm concerned. Pharma will play a part in terms of funding, but you know, we have clients here, we have clients at Baberham, we have clients Milton Park, etc., etc. It's up to the